"Somebody call 911. He's turning blue." Maya Williams screamed as she threw down her mop and ran forward. Gasps broke out across the executive boardroom. Just minutes earlier, Richard Kane, billionaire, CEO, master of this kingdom in the heart of Chicago, had been standing at the head of the long mahogany table, his voice deep and measured as he presented quarterly numbers. Then, in mid-sentence, he'd stopped. His hand shot to his chest. His breath hitched. The room fell into stunned silence as his body convulsed once, twice, and then collapsed to the floor. At first, no one believed it. The executives froze. 7 men in tailored suits worth more than Maya's annual salary combined. Someone muttered, "He's joking." Another whispered, "Oh God, call security." And then the truth hit. Richard Kane wasn't moving. His lips were turning blue, but Maya did. She pushed the door open wider and charged in, shoving past the frozen wall of expensive cologne and ego. "Maya, what the hell are you doing?" one man barked. "She doesn't belong here," another snapped. "Get out." "I know CPR," she shouted, but no one cared. Richard Kane was lying on his side, one hand limp against his chest, his lips a frightening shade of bluish gray. He wasn't breathing. Maya dropped to her knees beside him. "Sir? Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered, panic rising in her throat. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. No pulse. Then she acted. She had taken a free CPR course at the Southside Rec Center just for the grocery voucher. But in that moment, the instructor's voice was clearer in her head than anything else in the room. "If they're not breathing, you are their lungs." She tilted his head back, pinched his nose, and leaned in. "Is she kissing him?" someone shouted. "She's disgusting," another yelled. "Get her off him." A sharp pain seared across her back. Someone had struck her with something hard, a cane, maybe, or an umbrella. She winced but didn't stop. She gave him 2 rescue breaths. Then she locked her hands and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another blow landed on her shoulder. She groaned but kept counting. "You filthy girl!" A voice hissed above her. "Keep your hands off him." The boardroom erupted into chaos around her, but Maya stayed grounded. Her arms burned, her back ached, her eyes stung, but she didn't stop. "Come on," she whispered through clenched teeth. "Don't die on me, not like this." 25, 26, 27. Someone tried pulling at her shoulder. She shrugged them off violently. She leaned in again and gave 2 more breaths. Suddenly, Richard's chest jerked. He coughed violently, then sucked in air like a man pulled from the bottom of the ocean. His eyelids fluttered. He was breathing. Maya sat back, trembling. Her hands were shaking. Her back throbbed where the blows had landed, but he was alive. She had done it. The suits now scrambled to his side, falling over one another in a clumsy panic. "Mr. Kane, Richard, stay with us, sir." No one looked at Maya. The boardroom doors flew open and paramedics rushed in. They quickly took over, assessing vitals, lifting Richard onto a stretcher. One of them turned to the room and asked, "Who started CPR?" "I did," Maya said, her voice faint. Before the medic could respond, a tall man with silver hair stepped forward. His badge read, Edmund Ross, CFO. His face was twisted with revulsion. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Maya Williams," she said, straightening up. "I'm a cleaner." "You put your mouth on Mr. Kane," he said, as though she'd spit on the man instead of saving him. He wasn't breathing. We'll review the security footage," he interrupted. "You are to leave immediately and not return until contacted." Her throat closed up. Her back still pulsed with pain. She looked around the room at the executives she'd just saved from watching their boss die. Not a single word of thanks. Maya picked up her mop bucket with shaking arms and wheeled it out. Every step away from that room felt heavier than the last. She took the service elevator, alone. She rode the crowded bus home that night, her shoulders hunched, her eyes staring out the window as city lights blurred into long lines. Her neighborhood was quiet when she arrived, just the dull hum of a distant train and the laughter of kids playing stickball in the alley. Her daughter Daisy met her at the door, barefoot, cradling a worn-out teddy bear. "Mama, you're late," she said softly. "You okay?" "I'm fine, baby," Maya lied. "Just a crazy day at work." She tucked Daisy into bed after a simple dinner of boxed mac and cheese and leftover greens. That night, Maya lay on her mattress listening to the radiator hiss. She traced the bruise forming on her back and bit her lip. She had saved a man's life, and all they saw was a poor black janitor laying hands on a white billionaire. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, the moment her hands brought breath back into a dying man, would change everything. Just not the way she expected. The next morning, Maya Williams stood at the front of the Kane Global Tower, wearing the same gray uniform she'd worn every night for the past 3 months. The sun had just risen, casting pale orange light across the plaza. Her hands clutched her lunch bag, a plastic grocery sack holding a peanut butter sandwich, a bruised apple, and the hope that everything would return to normal. She took a breath and stepped toward the revolving door. Before she could reach the handle, a firm arm blocked her path. "Ma'am, you can't go in," said the security guard. Maya blinked. "What? I work here. Night crew. I'm on the 22nd floor." He didn't meet her eyes. "I was told not to let you in." Her stomach twisted. "Why? I haven't done anything wrong." "Check with HR," the guard muttered, already turning away. Maya stood frozen in place, the morning chill biting through her thin sleeves. Pedestrians brushed past, barely sparing her a glance. She felt like a ghost outside the walls that had ignored her for months, except now they saw her, and they wanted her gone. She walked around the building to the rear service entrance. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone forgot to log her return. She'd been told to wait until contacted, but that was for medical review, wasn't it? At the service desk, the night shift supervisor looked up from a clipboard. "Maya Williams?" he said, surprised. "Wait here." She waited in the narrow hallway by the janitor lockers. The walls smelled like bleach and old floor wax. Her name was still scrawled in Sharpie across the top of locker 7. 10 minutes later, the supervisor returned with a sealed envelope and a flat expression. "You're being let go," he said. Maya stared. "Let go? Why? What did I do?" The man shrugged. "HR said it's for inappropriate conduct involving executive staff. That's all they told me." Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a check and a letter standard termination notice. Her last paycheck. No severance. No explanation. Just her name, typed in black ink, above a line that said, "Employment terminated immediately. Inappropriate conduct." The words echoed in her head like sirens. She stood in the hallway for a long moment. No one came to talk to her. No one offered a word of comfort. The door to the main lobby swung shut behind her like a final sentence. Outside, the world carried on. People in suits sipped lattes, caught taxis, talked on phones. She walked the length of the block without realizing it. Her thoughts churning. They think I did something wrong. They think I... She stopped at the bus shelter and sank onto the bench, her legs suddenly too weak to carry her. A notification buzzed on her phone. A text from someone she barely knew on the night crew. It was a screenshot. A message in a group chat. "Did y'all see this? Girl from janitorial was all over Mr. Kane while he was unconscious. Looked like she was kissing him." Another message followed. "Nasty. That's assault, right?" Maya's chest tightened. Her hands went cold. They'd twisted what happened. The CPR. The breaths that saved his life. They were turning it into something else. Something vile. Her phone vibrated again, another message. Another thread. Now there was a photo. Blurry. Pulled from the security footage. Probably leaked by someone in maintenance. A still image. Maya hunched over Richard Kane. Her face close to his. She dropped the phone onto her lap and stared into the street. Across from her, a billboard showed Richard Kane's face smiling. Arms crossed in front of the skyline. The slogan beneath it read, "Integrity. Vision. Leadership." Her stomach turned. She rode the bus home in silence, pressed against the window as the city grew smaller, harder, grayer. The south side felt like another planet. Her daughter Daisy met her at the door again. "Mama, you're back early." Maya nodded. They let me go." Daisy's eyes widened. "But why?" "I don't know," she said, forcing a smile. "They just said it was a misunderstanding." Her mother, sitting in the kitchen, turned down the volume on the TV. "You look like you've seen a ghost," the older woman said, concern etched in her brow. "I'm okay, Mama," Maya lied. "Just tired." Later that night, she lay on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The radiator hissed again. Somewhere down the hall, a couple argued. A baby cried. Life moved on around her. She opened her phone once more. The messages hadn't stopped. Some were cruel. Others pretended concern. Most were just whispers. One voice message came from a girl in building services. "Hey, I don't know what happened, but folks are saying you did something real inappropriate with Mr. Kane. Maybe you should keep your head down for a while." She turned off the phone and let it fall beside her. Inappropriate. It was the word people used when they didn't want to see the truth. She remembered how it felt when Richard gasped for breath beneath her hands, the jolt of his body, the life coming back. She had saved a man. And now they treated her like she had touched something forbidden, like her hands were too black, too poor, too wrong to have been part of that moment. She buried her face in her pillow and wept. It was supposed to mean something, saving a life. But here, in this city, in this world, her life was the one being erased. Tomorrow, she would start looking for new work. She'd knock on doors. She'd clean wherever someone would let her. But tonight, the injustice was too heavy to carry, and she couldn't know that somewhere high above, in a penthouse glowing with city light, Richard Kane was sitting up in bed, clutching his chest in a cold sweat, haunted by a stranger's voice calling him back from death. He just didn't know her name yet. If Maya's story touched your heart, tap to show your support and tell us where you're watching from. You might be surprised who's watching this story near you. Richard Kane sat on the edge of his California king bed, drenched in sweat. The early morning light bled through the sheer drapes of his penthouse, brushing pale gold across the sharp lines of the room. His heart pounded beneath his chest like it was trying to claw its way out. The nightmare had returned. For the fourth night in a row, he was standing in a void, choking, arms reaching out into nothing, no light, no sound, until there it was again, that voice. A woman's voice, trembling but firm. "Come on, breathe, come back." Every time, he'd jerk awake, gasping, and every time, the name of the voice's owner slipped just beyond his memory. He rubbed his face and stood, walking barefoot across the marble floor into the kitchen. The coffee maker beeped quietly. Already brewing, his assistant had set the timer the night before. As the dark roast filled the air, Richard leaned on the counter and stared at the city below. Chicago buzzed to life beneath him. Cabs, bicycles, street vendors setting up on corners. He was 39 floors above it all, insulated by glass, wealth, and silence. Yet something didn't feel right. He reached for his phone and scrolled through emails. Contract approvals. Press briefings. A request from a PR firm for a video interview. Nothing about the incident. He clicked into the Kane Global Internal Updates portal. Still nothing. He frowned. Someone had saved his life. The doctors told him so. He had suffered sudden cardiac arrest. The odds of survival in such events were less than 10% without immediate CPR. Someone had kept his heart beating until the paramedics arrived, and no one was telling him who. His executives had been polite, vague. "It's all been handled, sir. Nothing to concern yourself with, Mr. Kane. We've taken proper action internally." The answers made his skin crawl. Who had touched his chest? Who had pressed their lips to his, breathed life back into his lungs? His mind drifted again to the dream. That voice, gentle, shaking, black, young, kept whispering him back from the brink. He could feel her hands again, the pressure on his ribs, the warmth of her breath. Who was she? Why wouldn't anyone tell him? He didn't like being kept in the dark, not in his own company, not about his own life. He picked up his phone and hit a contact. "Lucas," he said when his head of security answered, "I want to see the security footage from the boardroom, the morning of the incident." A pause. "Sir, IHR already reviewed it. Legal has a copy. I don't care. I want it in my inbox. Now." "Yes, sir." Richard ended the call. He stared out the window again, this time seeing nothing but fog on the glass. His reflection looked pale, tired, distant. A man brought back from death, with no memory of the person who saved him. 20 minutes later, the email arrived. He opened the file. There he was, projected in cold, sterile clarity, standing at the head of the long glass conference table, gesturing mid-sentence, then pausing. One hand flew to his chest. His mouth moved, but there was no sound. His body lurched, then crumpled like wet paper. The men around him panicked. Some stood, some shouted, none stepped forward. Then the door at the far end opened. A woman in a gray janitor's uniform entered, wheeling a mop bucket. Richard leaned in. She looked confused at first, then saw him on the floor and dropped everything. Without hesitation, she ran toward him, knelt, checked his pulse. Her hands moved with urgency. She pinched his nose and performed mouth to mouth, pressed down on his chest, counted out loud. He watched her face, the way her jaw clenched, how her eyes brimmed with tears, how she ignored the yelling suits, the pointing fingers. She was focused on one thing, saving him. And then he saw it. A man, Edmund Ross, his chief financial officer, approached her, angry, furious. He grabbed her shoulder and yanked her back. Richard hit pause. His hands were shaking. He watched the rest of the footage in silence. The woman was led away like a criminal. No handshake, no thank you, no recognition. She'd saved his life and been punished for it. Richard stood slowly, his chest tight, not from pain but from rage. He called again. "Lucas," he said, voice low and cold. "Where is Maya Williams?" "Sir?" "The woman in the footage. The janitor. What happened to her?" "A beat. She was let go by HR. There were allegations." "Allegations?" Richard hissed. "She saved my life." Sir, there were concerns about optics, media liability." "Find her," he said. "Find her address. Everything. I want it on my desk by noon." "Yes, Mr. Kane." Richard ended the call and exhaled slowly. He stood in the center of his immaculate kitchen, surrounded by silence, and for the first time since he woke from the hospital bed, he felt something crack beneath his ribs. It wasn't pain. It was shame. Down on the south side, Maya Williams didn't know he'd seen the footage, didn't know he remembered her eyes, didn't know that everything was about to change. But she would. Soon. 3 days passed, and Maya Williams had yet to find work. Her mornings were spent circling job listings in the classifieds with a red pen she'd found in the couch cushions, and her afternoons knocking on doors, laundromats, diners, cleaning agencies, anywhere that might pay enough to keep the lights on. But everywhere she went, the answer was the same: a hesitant look, a whisper, and a polite shake of the head. By the 4th morning, her name had become a rumor. At the corner laundromat, a young woman folded shirts and said quietly, "You're that lady from the building, aren't you? The one who—" She stopped mid-sentence when Maya looked up. "Never mind." Maya forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's okay. You can say it. The one who tried to save a man and got fired for it." The woman's lips pressed tight. "People say you did more than that." Maya didn't ask what she meant. She already knew. The internet had turned her act of CPR into something filthy. The headlines on gossip blogs called her the janitor who couldn't keep her hands to herself. Someone had leaked a still from the security camera, grainy, blurry, but damning enough. The image of her lips pressed to Richard Kane's had spread like rot. Back home, the small apartment smelled of old carpet and boiled coffee. Her mother sat by the window reading the newspaper aloud. "City council votes against wage increase again," she muttered, then looked up. "You eat anything?" "Not yet," Maya said, rinsing a cup in the sink. "I'll fix something for Daisy first." The little girl padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, are you going to work today?" "Not today, baby," Maya said softly. "Mama's taking a little time off." "Oh," Daisy frowned. "Grandma said people were mean to you." "Why?" Maya crouched and brushed a curl from her daughter's cheek. "Sometimes people get scared when they don't understand what's good. But it'll be okay." Her mother sighed. "Child, you need to let it go. You can't fight the people who write the stories. They always win." "I don't want to fight," Maya said quietly. "I just want them to tell the truth." That afternoon, she took the bus to a small cleaning service on 18th Street. The owner, an older man with a cigar smell clinging to his shirt, scanned her resume, then set it down. "You worked at Kane Global?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly, then leaned back. "I heard about that situation. I can't have that kind of attention here." "I'm sorry." Maya's throat went dry. "Attention? You mean saving a man's life?" "I mean controversy," he said bluntly. "Clients don't like drama. Try somewhere else." When she stepped outside, the sky was beginning to gray. Wind cut through her jacket as she walked the cracked sidewalk toward the bus stop. A group of teenagers loitered by the corner store, one of them scrolling on his phone. As she passed, he nudged his friend and whispered loud enough for her to hear. "That's her, the janitor chick. Saw the clip she was kissing that rich dude for real." The laughter that followed chased her down the block. By the time she reached the bus shelter, tears stung her eyes. She sat with her head bowed, arms crossed, trying to hold herself together. When she got home, her mother was on the phone, voice low and urgent. She glanced up, covering the receiver. "It's your sister. She says folks at church been talking. They saw some video online." Maya closed her eyes. Of course they did. That night, she tried to delete her social media accounts, but new ones appeared, fake profiles using her picture, cruel captions. "Gold digger janitor seduces her boss. Black woman assaults billionaire." She turned off her phone and sat in the dark until the hum of the refrigerator became the only sound in the apartment. When she finally lay down beside her sleeping daughter, her body throbbed with exhaustion, her back still sore from the blows she'd taken in that boardroom. She pressed a hand against the bruised spot, remembering the sound, the dull crack, the gasp she'd swallowed. "Justice isn't blind," she whispered to herself. "It just refuses to look down." In the middle of the night, the phone rang. She fumbled to answer. "Miss Williams?" The voice was sharp, official. "This is HR from Kane Global. We've concluded our investigation." Her heart leapt. "Does that mean I can—" "You are terminated effective immediately," the woman interrupted. "Our internal review determined your behavior was inappropriate. We won't be pressing charges, but we advise you not to return to the premises." Maya sat up, numb. "Inappropriate? Your contact with Mr. Kane was excessive. The footage speaks for itself." She could barely breathe. "I was giving him CPR. He wasn't breathing. Our decision is final, Miss Williams. You'll receive your last paycheck by mail." The line went dead. For a long time she sat there, the phone pressed to her ear, staring at the shadowed wall. Daisy stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about pancakes. Maya turned toward her daughter and felt her chest ache. What would she tell her in the morning? That her mother lost her job for saving a man's life? That truth didn't matter when you were poor, black, and invisible? She leaned back against the headboard, her eyes burning. "God," she whispered, "if you're listening, what am I supposed to do now?" Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Rain began to patter against the window pane. The leaky gutter dripped a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat mocking, relentless. Across town, in his penthouse, Richard Kane stared at his laptop. The video had finished playing, but the image of Maya on her knees beside him wouldn't leave his mind. He could see the fear in her face, the determination, the courage, and the horror when she was dragged away. He clicked pause, then leaned back in his chair, every muscle rigid. He'd built an empire on the illusion of control. But this had happened under his roof, under his name. His jaw tightened. "Find her," he murmured to the empty room, "before it's too late." Richard Kane stood alone on the rooftop balcony of his penthouse, the wind tugging gently at his open collar. The city of Chicago stretched endlessly before him, glittering steel, flashing lights, rivers of traffic snaking between towers. To the world below, he was invincible. But tonight, he felt like a man unraveling. He sipped a glass of bourbon he didn't taste. The image of her wouldn't leave his mind. Maya Williams. Her name now etched into his consciousness, carved deep with every second of that video he'd watched again and again. The way her brow furrowed in desperation, the tremble in her arms. The moment his chest rose beneath her hands, the life she forced back into him. She had saved him, and they had destroyed her for it. He'd seen it clearly in the footage, how Edmund had grabbed her, how no one had thanked her. She had been manhandled, dismissed like trash. All under the watch of the people he trusted, the people he paid, the people who let her bleed for him in silence. He clenched his jaw and turned back inside, the city lights trailing across the glass floor. "Alexa," he said sharply, "call Edmund Ross." The digital assistant beeped. The line rang 3 times before a groggy voice picked up. "Sir, it's almost midnight. Don't play innocent with me, Edmund," Richard said, his voice steel. "Tell me what you did to the woman who saved my life." Edmund stammered. "We handled the situation as best we could. There were complications, allegations." There were lies, Richard snapped. You fired her for doing CPR. You buried it. It wasn't that simple. Don't insult my intelligence. Silence. Richard's voice dropped lower, deadlier. I watched the footage. You manhandled her. You stood there, while everyone else did nothing. You called her inappropriate. She saved my life while you stood frozen. Edmund exhaled shakily. Sir, the optics. Richard slammed his hand on the counter, the glass shaking. Get out of my office, Edmund. Pack your things before I forget how long you've worked for me. The call ended. Richard leaned over the kitchen island, breathing hard. His hands trembled not from fear, but from shame. He had died, and she had brought him back. And then they discarded her like she was nothing. He opened his laptop and dialed another number, his personal assistant, Natalie. She picked up instantly, her voice alert. Mr. Kane, I need you to find someone. Her name is Maya Williams. She was a janitor here. Fired last week. A pause. She's the one from the footage, isn't she? Yes. I'll find her, Natalie said. Give me until morning. No, Richard said. Now. He didn't sleep. Not really. He sat in the chair beside the fireplace, laptop on his knees. The video paused on the frame where Maya looked up just as he gasped his first breath. Her eyes had locked on his. If only for a second. There had been something in them, a question, maybe. A quiet plea. Don't forget. By dawn, Natalie called back. I found her, she said. She lives in South Side. Single mom. Apartment in a housing complex with 6 other families. According to the records, she hasn't had power for 2 days. No. Richard's chest tightened. And no one's helped her? No. The cleaning agency blacklisted her. She's being called a predator online. Some tabloid published a story suggesting she assaulted you while you were unconscious. Richard rubbed his forehead. Jesus. There's something else, Natalie added. According to a neighbor, she hasn't been seen outside in 2 days. Her daughter's been asking around for food. That did it. Richard didn't send a driver. He put on jeans, a wool coat, and grabbed his car keys. His black Mercedes slid through the city like a shadow as he headed south, watching the towers fade into brick buildings, faded murals, boarded windows. He hadn't driven himself in years. It felt right. The neighborhood where Maya lived was a world away from the glass and gold realm he ruled. Potholes rattled his wheels. Children played in muddy lots. A man sold hot dogs from a rusted cart, steam billowing into the cold morning. He found the address. A squat brown building with chipped paint and a sagging staircase. He parked and stepped out, the December air biting at his neck. He knocked. A few seconds passed before the door creaked open. A little girl stared up at him. Hair in puffs. T-shirt too thin. Her eyes widened. You're the man from the billboard, she whispered. I'm looking for Maya, Richard said gently. Does she live here? The girl's face crumpled. She's sick, she whispered. She won't wake up. I tried soup. I tried medicine. Nothing works. She keeps saying she's tired. Richard's throat tightened. How long has she been like this? Since the day she got fired, the girl said. She stopped eating. She kept saying it's not fair. And then, she just stopped getting up. Richard pushed the door open. The apartment was small. The walls were faded, the heater barely working. Maya lay on a thin mattress in the corner, wrapped in 2 threadbare blankets. Her face was gaunt, cheeks hollow, her breathing shallow. He knelt beside her. Maya, he whispered. It's me, Richard Kane. She didn't stir. He took her hand. It was hot to the touch, fevered. Call an ambulance, he shouted to the hallway. Now, the little girl watched from the corner, clutching a worn teddy bear. Richard held Maya's hand tighter. You saved my life, he said, voice cracking. Now let me save yours. As the sirens wailed in the distance, he looked down at the woman who had brought him back from death and realized this time he was the one who couldn't afford to lose her. The ambulance pulled up in front of the building with its lights flashing, but no sirens. The paramedics moved swiftly, professionally, asking questions Richard Kane barely registered as they lifted Maya's limp body onto a stretcher. He followed them into the ambulance without hesitation, ignoring the stares of neighbors peering from their windows and porches. Inside the vehicle, The medic clipped a pulse oximeter to Maya's finger and wrapped a cuff around her arm. Severe dehydration. Fevers over 103. Breathing shallow. When did this start? Richard gripped the edge of the bench seat. I don't know. I just found her like this. She's been unconscious since I arrived. No, she's going into systemic stress, the medic muttered, hanging an IV bag on the hook above Maya's head. We need to stabilize her, fast. The ambulance rocked as it turned onto the main road. Richard glanced down at Maya's face, pale and sunken, with beads of sweat shining on her brow. He gently reached over and took her hand again, careful not to disturb the IV. Her fingers didn't respond, but he held them anyway. You fought to keep me alive, he whispered. Don't you dare give up now. The medic looked over, recognition dawning in his eyes. Wait. You're Richard Kane. Richard nodded, his jaw tight. The man glanced at Maya. Is she the one who… Yes. The medic didn't say anything else, but something changed in his eyes, respect, maybe. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a private medical center on the north side, one of the city's best. Richard had called ahead. A team of doctors and nurses met them at the emergency entrance, wheeling Maya away through the double doors. Richard followed until a nurse gently blocked his path. We'll do everything we can, Mr. Kane. Please wait here. He nodded and stepped back, watching until Maya's stretcher disappeared behind swinging doors. The waiting room was pristine leather chairs, warm lighting, a piano playing soft jazz in the corner. But Richard felt like he was underwater. He sat, stood, paced, then sat again. He called Natalie. She's at Northside Medical. I need you to clear my calendar for the next 2 days. And get me her daughter, Daisy. She's alone. I'm on it, Natalie said without hesitation. By the time Daisy arrived with a social worker an hour later, Richard was standing at the window, watching snowflakes drift down over the city skyline. He turned when he heard her voice. Is my mom okay? He knelt to her level. The doctors are helping her now. She's strong. She saved me once, remember? I think she can do it again. Daisy nodded bravely, holding her teddy bear tight. I gave her soup, but she didn't eat it. I tried to be good. You did more than good, he said gently. You took care of her, just like she took care of me. A nurse appeared at the door. Mr. Kane, you can see her now. He rose and took Daisy's hand. Together, they walked down a quiet hallway and into a private room. Maya lay in the hospital bed, an oxygen line under her nose, fluids dripping from the IV beside her. Her chest rose and fell slowly, rhythmically. She's going to be okay, the nurse said softly. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition. Stress-induced immune collapse. But she's responding well. Her vitals are improving. Richard let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Thank you, he said. Daisy walked to the bedside and laid her teddy bear gently on her mother's chest. I told you I took care of her, she whispered. Richard stood beside the bed and looked down at Maya. Her face was softer now, less gray, less broken. He sat in the chair next to her and didn't move for hours. At one point, Daisy fell asleep in the corner, curled into a hospital blanket. Nurses brought warm soup and crackers. Richard barely touched his. He just watched Maya, his thoughts tangled with guilt and disbelief. He remembered the first board meeting she'd walked into, how no one noticed her, how he hadn't noticed her. She had walked through that door invisible, and she had saved his life. It wasn't just CPR, it was defiance, against power, against fear, against a system that expected her to stay quiet and unseen. He couldn't erase what had happened, but he could damn well change what came next. Hours passed, night fell, the only sound was the monitor's steady beep and Daisy's breathing. Then, without warning, Maya stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, her hand twitched. Richard stood up quickly. Maya? Her head turned slightly, eyes opening slowly. She blinked, disoriented, then focused on his face. What? She rasped. Where am I? You're in the hospital, he said gently. You collapsed, but you're safe now. She frowned, her voice barely audible. Why? Why are you here? He knelt beside her, his voice thick. Because I watched the footage. All of it. I saw what you did. You saved my life. And they punished you for it. Maya, I'm so sorry. Tears pooled in her eyes. They said I assaulted you. I know, he said, his jaw clenching. They lied. And I let them lie in my name. But no more. She turned her head away, blinking hard. It didn't matter. I'm just a cleaner. No one believes people like me. I believe you, he said, not just because I saw it, but because I felt it. You were the only one who did anything, the only one who didn't look away. Maya turned back toward him. Her voice was soft, but firm. Then help me, not just with doctors and money. Help me be seen. Help my daughter grow up in a world where doing the right thing doesn't mean losing everything. Richard nodded slowly. I will. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to rest. For the first time in days, maybe longer, Richard stood and looked at her one more time before whispering, You're not invisible anymore. The morning sunlight broke gently through the hospital blinds, painting quiet stripes across the pale blue walls. Maya lay sleeping, her breath steady now, her face no longer ashen but soft and warm. Next to her, Richard Kane sat in the armchair, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on the woman who had shaken his entire world by simply doing what no one else dared. He hadn't left her side all night. The weight of guilt still clung to his shoulders like wet cloth, heavy and suffocating. For a man who'd built a billion-dollar empire by making hard decisions and trusting the chain of command, this one had slipped through his fingers like smoke. And it nearly cost someone everything. He pulled out his phone and opened Maya's file again. Natalie had gathered it overnight, every scrap of information available. Pieced together like a puzzle the world had thrown away. Name, Maya Clarice Williams. Age, 29. Education, high school diploma, GED. 1 year of nursing school dropped out due to financial hardship. Employment history, janitorial services, part-time elder care, food delivery. Family, 1 daughter, Daisy, mother, Elena Williams, disabled. Address, South Side, Chicago. Known for high crime, poor infrastructure, and city neglect. There were notes from her former landlord, even a court filing for eviction. She hadn't paid rent in 3 months. Her power had been cut off last week. He swallowed hard, and all of this had happened after she saved his life. Richard stood and stepped into the hallway, where a nurse passed him with a nod. He walked until he found a quiet alcove near the family lounge, pulled out his phone again, and called Natalie. Yes, Mr. Kane? She answered immediately. Send 2 cars to South Side, 1 for her daughter, 1 for her mother. I want them moved to temporary housing, furnished, safe, stocked with groceries. Pick somewhere warm, quiet, close to a good school, and call Dr. Hanley. Tell him I want her mother evaluated today. Full medical review. Done, Natalie said without missing a beat. And Natalie, he added, his voice softer. Make sure there's a crib set up in the new place, just in case Daisy's too scared to sleep alone for a while. There was a pause on the line. Understood, sir. He hung up and returned to Maya's room. She was awake now, propped slightly on the pillow, her eyes still heavy with exhaustion but more alert than the night before. Daisy sat beside her, legs swinging off the edge of the chair, coloring with a set of hospital crayons a nurse had found. She looked up and grinned when she saw Richard. Hi, Mr. Kane. Hi, Daisy. How's your mama doing? She's better. She smiled when I gave her my drawing. Maya turned her head toward him slowly. You came back, she said. I never left, Richard replied. She studied him. You really saw the footage? He nodded. All of it? She asked, more doubt than challenge in her voice. Yes, he said. I watched you fight to save me while everyone else stood there frozen. And then I watched them treat you like a criminal. Maya, I am so sorry. Maya looked away. Sorry doesn't change what they did. No, he agreed. But it's a start, and so is this. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. This is a formal statement, signed and notarized, from me clearing your name and confirming your actions were life-saving and entirely appropriate. No misconduct, no violation. She hesitated before taking it from him. Her fingers shook slightly as she unfolded the page. When her eyes landed on the words, her lips parted just a little. There's more, he said. I've already sent a team to relocate your mother and daughter to a safe, comfortable apartment, rent-free, for as long as you need. Her head snapped up. What? No, no, you don't have to. I do, he interrupted gently, because I let them ruin your life in my name, and I can't undo the pain they caused, but I can make sure you never have to feel like you're alone again. Maya swallowed hard, blinking quickly. Why? Why do you care now? He paused, searching for the right words. Because when I was dying, I didn't see a janitor. I didn't see race, class, status. I saw someone fighting to keep me alive. And after I lived, I let the world erase you. That makes me complicit, and I won't be anymore. Daisy looked up at her mother. See? I told you he was a good guy. Maya let out a breath, part laugh, part sigh. You always were a better judge of character than me, baby. Richard smiled. There's one more thing. If you'll allow me, I want to offer you a position, not as a cleaner, as director of a new employee wellness program I'm launching at Kane Global. Maya's eyes widened. What? I want you to help design a system that makes sure no one ever goes unseen again, especially the people who keep the lights on and the floors clean. I want you to be the one to rebuild what I let rot. She stared at him, speechless. You said something last night, he continued, about not just needing help, but needing to be seen. That stayed with me. Her fingers curled around the edge of the blanket. I'm not qualified for something like that. You are, he said, stepping closer. Because you understand. You know what it's like to be invisible, and now you have the power to change that for others. Maya looked at Daisy, then back at Richard. I need time to think, she said. Of course, he replied. Take all the time you need. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. And Maya, he said softly, you saved me once. Maybe this is my chance to return the favor. When he was gone, Maya lay back against the pillows, the formal statement still in her hand. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of her story. Maybe it was the beginning. 2 days later, Maya stepped through the door of her new apartment for the first time. Her legs still trembled from the days in the hospital, and her right hand was wrapped in gauze from where the IV had sat for nearly 48 hours. But none of that mattered now. She stood in silence for a long moment, staring into the softly lit living room. There was no peeling paint, no flickering overhead bulb, no busted heater in the corner gasping for life. Instead, there was a beige couch with clean cushions, a low wooden table, soft carpet under her shoes, and curtains that actually matched. The entire space smelled of lemon and something warm, fresh linen maybe. Daisy ran past her with wide eyes, giggling. We have our own kitchen. Mama, look. There's even cereal in the cabinet. Maya blinked back the sting in her eyes. Elena, her mother, followed slowly behind with the help of a walker provided by the private hospital. Her back still hunched, her legs stiff, but her eyes were sharper than they'd been in weeks. Well, I'll be damned, Elena murmured. I ain't seen a place this clean since your Aunt Charlene's wedding. Maya let out a soft laugh, the sound cracking with emotion. They stepped inside together, closing the door behind them, like sealing off a chapter of their lives. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like they were intruding on a space that wasn't theirs. This was theirs. A welcome packet sat on the counter with her name on it. Next to it, a small vase of white daisies. There was a note card tucked beneath it. You deserve peace. R.K. Maya folded the card, holding it briefly to her chest. In the days since the hospital, she hadn't seen Richard Kane again in person, but his presence lingered in everything: the private medical care, the moving service, the therapy appointments already scheduled for Daisy, the job offer still waiting in her inbox. He hadn't pressured her. He'd simply made space for her to choose, and right now, that meant everything. She stepped into the kitchen, where stainless steel appliances gleamed. A loaf of bread, a carton of milk, and a dozen eggs sat neatly in the fridge, more than she'd had in weeks. Daisy opened a pantry drawer and pulled out a box of crayons. There's paper too. Mama, I can draw pictures again. Elena sat slowly at the breakfast bar and looked around the room. Girl, you sure this ain't some kind of trap? Ain't no landlord ever this generous unless they want something back. Maya turned to her. He's not asking for anything. Her mother gave her a long, skeptical look. No man gives this much without expecting something eventually. Maya was quiet for a moment, then said, He doesn't owe me kindness. He owes me justice. And maybe this is his way of giving it. Elena grunted. Justice would have come before they dragged your name through the mud. Not after. Maya didn't argue. She couldn't. She walked into the small bedroom at the end of the hall. A queen-sized bed with clean sheets. A dresser. A lamp. No moldy windows. No chipped corners. A small stack of books sat on the nightstand, titles about leadership, wellness in the workplace, and even one about surviving public scandal. A post-it note on the cover of that last one simply read, Page 47. It helped me. RK. Maya smiled faintly and sat on the edge of the bed, fingers grazing the quilt. Daisy called from the living room. Can I go see the garden downstairs? Later, baby, Maya replied. We've got a lot to unpack. Elena slowly wheeled herself to the doorframe. You think you're going to take that job? Maya looked up at her mother. I don't know, she admitted. It scares me. You faced a man dying on the floor and didn't flinch. But a desk job got you scared? Elena raised an eyebrow. It's not the work, Maya said quietly. It's being visible. Her mother's voice softened. Maybe being seen is the bravest thing of all. That night, after Daisy had fallen asleep in her own bed, a twin-sized one with dinosaur sheets she'd chosen from a catalog, and her mother had retired to the guest room, Maya stepped out onto the small balcony. The city lights shimmered in the distance. Not so far as to feel foreign, but distant enough to remind her of how far she'd come in a matter of days. She sat on a wicker chair, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, her mind swirling. The injustice still haunted her. The online rumors hadn't disappeared. People still whispered her name in grocery stores. Her phone still buzzed with the occasional anonymous message. But here, in this quiet moment, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Not safety, not yet, but possibility. Her phone buzzed again. A new message from Richard Kane. No pressure. But I'd be honored if you'd visit the new office space. It's yours to design. Whatever you dream, start there. Below it was a photo attachment, an empty office floor with wide windows, sunlight pouring in, fresh paint, blank walls, clean floors waiting for new footsteps. Maya stared at it for a long time. She could picture it, a place where no janitor had to enter through the back door, where wellness meant more than fruit in the break room, where voices like hers weren't just tolerated, they were needed. She tapped a reply. I'll come see it, one step at a time. Her fingers hovered before she added, Thank you for giving me room to breathe. She put the phone down, leaned back, and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. The following Monday, Maya stood in front of a gleaming glass building in River North, where the breeze carried the scent of roasted coffee from a nearby cafe, and the sidewalks gleamed like they'd just been washed by a spring rain. She adjusted her scarf and looked up at the sign that read, Kane Global, Executive Annex. The building didn't carry the weight of intimidation that the original tower did. This one was newer, quieter, tucked into a street where professionals strolled with purpose, but not pretense. Natalie had texted her the address and simply said, 3rd floor, elevator to the right, he'll be waiting. Maya's palms were sweating. She told herself this was just a visit, a tour, nothing more. But as she stepped into the lobby, every eye seemed to follow her, not with suspicion, but with recognition. The security guard nodded gently. A receptionist offered a smile. It was the kind of polite acknowledgement she never used to receive. She stepped into the elevator. The doors slid closed. As it ascended, she exhaled slowly, trying to settle the knot in her stomach. It wasn't just nerves. It was the weight of every day she had walked into a building and been ignored. Of every hallway where her footsteps were the only ones that didn't echo with purpose. The elevator chimed. She stepped out onto a bright, open floor, completely empty. No cubicles, no partitions, just sunlight, a view of the river, and at the far end, Richard Kane, standing by the windows with a cup of coffee in hand. He turned the moment she stepped in. I was starting to wonder if you'd changed your mind, he said with a smile that didn't push. I almost did, Maya replied honestly. Twice, before I even left the house. I get that, he said, setting the cup down on a windowsill. But I'm glad you came. Mo. She walked slowly across the open space, her footsteps echoing against polished concrete. This place feels different, she said. Less cold, less corporate. That's intentional, he replied. This floor is yours, if you want it. For the new department. Maya raised an eyebrow. Still trying to get me to take the job, huh? He smiled, this time with a touch of humility. I'm not trying to get you to do anything. I just want you to know the door's open, and that if anyone should be designing a wellness program, it's someone who knows what it's like to be overlooked. She walked to the nearest window, her eyes drifting to the view. The river glinted in the Sunday boats passed beneath arched bridges. A train rumbled in the distance. I've never had an office, she said quietly. The only keys I've ever had were to mop closets. Then it's about time, he said. Maya turned back to him, her voice cautious. I'm not a professional. I don't have degrees or titles. People will question why someone like me gets to build something in a place like this. Let them question it, he replied. You've earned this more than most. She studied him carefully. Richard Kane looked different than he had a week ago. The same pressed shirt, the same tailored slacks, but there was something softened in his face now, not weakened, opened, as if he was finally letting the world touch him back. And what about you? She asked. Why are you really doing this? He didn't flinch. Because when I was lying on that floor, dying, I realized I hadn't earned half the respect people gave me. Not like you did. And because power without responsibility is just vanity. I've had enough of that. She nodded slowly. They stood in silence for a beat, sunlight washing over them both. Would you like to see the design plans? He asked. I'd rather build my own, she said. His smile widened. Even better. No. He walked over to a cabinet in the corner and pulled out a thick sketch pad, a set of fine markers, and laid them on a high table in the center of the room. All yours. Maya approached the table and opened the first page, blank. She let her fingers hover over it for a moment. Then she picked up a marker. I want windows in every office, she said aloud. Real light. No more boxed. In break rooms that feel like broom closets. Richard pulled out a stool. Noted. And I want a wellness fund for transportation, childcare, rent assistance when needed, not just yoga classes. He chuckled. You drive a hard bargain. I'm not bargaining, Maya said, eyes focused on the page. I'm building. By the time she looked up, an hour had passed. A rough sketch of an open plan layout filled the first few pages, spaces labeled restroom, support counseling, child visit room. Small touches that came from years of watching working-class people break quietly under the pressure of being invisible. Richard had listened the entire time, only speaking when asked. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct. He just watched her come alive in a room built for her voice. As she packed her things, he asked, So, does that mean you're saying yes? She paused, one hand on the strap of her purse. I'm saying yes, she said. Not because I want to work for you, but because I want to work for the people you forgot. People like me. His nod was quiet, respectful. That's the best yes I've heard in a long time. She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Thank you, Richard, she said, her voice softer now, not just for the job, for seeing me. I should have done it sooner, he replied. She gave him a small smile. We all see things too late sometimes. What matters is what we do next. Oh. That night, back in her apartment, Maya sat with Daisy on the couch, eating bowls of macaroni and cheese, the fancy kind with real cheese packets. The city lights blinked gently through the window. You look happy, Mama, Daisy said between bites. Maya smiled. I think I am. At precisely 8:42 a.m., the next morning, Maya walked into Kane Global's executive annex for her first official day. The elevator ride felt less daunting this time, her reflection in the mirrored walls not one of a cleaner hoping to go unnoticed but of a woman claiming her place. She wore a simple navy blouse, slacks that actually fit, and her natural curls pinned into a soft twist at the crown. A delicate chain around her neck held a locket Daisy had given her. Inside, a tiny note written in crayon, You're brave, Mama. When the elevator doors opened, she was greeted not by Richard, but by Natalie, tall, sharp, and as composed as ever in a gray blazer. Good morning, Miss Williams, Natalie said with a warm smile. Maya, please. Then you'll have to call me Natalie. Come, I'll show you around. The office space had changed overnight. Glass partitions had been installed, sleek but not sterile. Colorful ergonomic chairs lined an open bullpen. One side of the floor was cordoned off for break areas, another for private counseling rooms that had yet to be furnished. In the corner, a whiteboard glowed with a bold message: "Wellness isn't a luxury, it's a right." Maya froze when she saw it. "You wrote that?" she asked Natalie. Natalie shook her head. "Richard did. Said it came from something you said in the hospital." Maya felt her throat tighten. She looked around the space hers, now. Not because someone gave it to her, but because she'd earned the right to lead it. "Where is he?" "Meeting with legal about Edmund Ross." Maya blinked. "He's still around?" "Not for long," Natalie said, her tone clipped. "Turns out, Edmund's been covering more than your incident. HR just opened an investigation into his misuse of discretionary funds, expense fraud, and a pattern of silencing employee complaints." Maya's breath caught. "And he's still walking free?" "For now, but not for long. Richard wants it handled by the book. Clean." Maya nodded slowly. "Good. Let him fall the right way." Natalie led her to her office, a corner space with sunlight flooding in through two massive windows. A long wooden desk. Bookshelves lining one wall. A pinboard with staff feedback suggestions already posted. She was stunned to see one card that read, "If Maya's running things, I finally believe change is real." She set her bag down. "Thank you, Natalie," Maya said sincerely. Natalie gave her a look, something that hovered between admiration and apology. "You deserve more than just a thank you, but we'll start there." After Natalie left, Maya took a few quiet moments alone. She sat at her desk, ran her hand over the smooth surface, and allowed herself a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the day she was fired. She opened her laptop and began drafting her first internal memo, but not everyone was thrilled. Across town, in a dimly lit conference room of a high-rise Maya would never have stepped foot in, Edmund Ross poured bourbon into a glass with a shaking hand. The news had reached him faster than expected. Richard Kane was building a new department and putting her in charge. Her, the cleaner. He stared at the photo on his phone. Maya standing with her arm around her daughter in a staged press release Richard had authorized the night before. The headline read, "Richard Kane appoints first woman of color to head Kane Global Wellness Program." Edmund's jaw clenched. He had built this company's HR infrastructure from scratch. Decades of meetings, legal shields, discreet firings, non-disclosure agreements signed in silence. And now, this woman, this janitor, was being handed a throne he considered his legacy. He tapped his phone and dialed a number. "Yeah," a man's voice answered. "It's Ross. I need a favor. Quiet. Off the books." "Men." "Go on. You ever heard of a woman named Maya Williams?" A pause. "The one who saved Kane? She's all over the damn news." "Exactly. I want you to find something on her. Anything. Old debt. Expunged record. Bad boyfriend. Doesn't matter. I want her discredited. That'll cost you." "I didn't ask for the price." The line clicked dead. Meanwhile, back at the annex, Maya was busy. She spent the rest of the day interviewing staff, receptionists, night shift maintenance, cafeteria workers, people who had never once been asked how they were doing. She filled 3 notebooks with notes. Chronic fatigue. No transportation assistance. Microaggressions ignored by middle managers, and a disturbing number of reports of janitorial staff being verbally abused by executives. At one point, a young woman named Carmen teared up when Maya simply asked, "What's something that would make you feel respected?" "No one's ever asked me that," Carmen whispered. Maya's voice was steady. "I'm asking now." She left the office at 6:30 p.m., the sun just beginning to dip behind the skyline. As she stepped outside, a breeze caught her coat and stirred the edges of her confidence. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, Maya walked away from her workplace not looking over her shoulder. Back home, Daisy greeted her with a crayon drawing of a tall building with hearts on the roof. "That's your office," she said proudly. Maya laughed, scooping her into her arms. "I think we need to add some windows." "I already did," Daisy said, tapping the paper, "so everyone can see you." As she tucked Daisy in that night, Maya whispered, "You're the reason I keep going." Daisy, already dozing, murmured, "You're the strongest lady in the world." Maya kissed her forehead. But outside, In the shadows of digital silence, someone was already digging. The following morning began with rain. Not a gentle drizzle, but a hard, unrelenting downpour that beat against the city's windows like it had a vendetta. Maya stood at her kitchen sink, her coffee cooling in her hand, as thunder rolled far in the distance. The storm hadn't woken her. Her instincts had. Something felt wrong. She couldn't explain it, but it sat in her gut like a stone. Her phone buzzed on the counter. "Natalie, call me when you get this. Something's come up." She called instantly. Natalie answered after the first ring. "We need to talk. Privately." Maya's spine straightened. "I'm listening." "There's been a leak," Natalie said, voice low and clipped. "Nothing big yet. A few online posts. Suspiciously coordinated. Your old eviction records, hospital records, even a juvenile misdemeanor that was sealed. Someone's trying to smear you." Maya's hand tightened around the coffee mug. "How bad is it?" "Contained, for now. I've already got our legal and PR teams preparing countermeasures. But the bigger concern is how someone got those records at all." There was only one name that came to Maya's mind. "Ross," she said quietly. Natalie didn't reply, but the silence was confirmation enough. "He's scared," Maya said. "Scared that a woman like me could have power he never gave." "Well, he's about to be more than scared," Natalie replied. "Richard is furious." Maya exhaled slowly. "Let him be. I'm not hiding." We didn't think you would," Natalie said. "Just be prepared. Today might not be easy." By the time Maya arrived at Kane Global's annex, the storm had lightened to a mist, but the tension inside the building was heavier than ever. Employees greeted her with tight smiles, supportive, but cautious. Rumors were already in the air. The whispers weren't malicious, but they were there. "Did you see that post about her? They said she used to have a record." "I don't care. She's better than half the execs I've worked under." Maya walked with her head high. She stepped into her office to find a bouquet of fresh sunflowers on her desk and a handwritten card. "The truth is louder than their noise. Keep walking." "RK." She smiled faintly, but her hands were shaking. Within the hour, she called an all-staff meeting. Every employee on the floor gathered in the common space: admin, security, cafeteria, maintenance, and even junior executives who had never once attended an open meeting before. Maya stood at the front, without podium or preamble. "You've probably seen the headlines," she began, "or heard the whispers." No one looked away. "A lot of people want you to believe that your past disqualifies you from having a future. That one mistake or even one hard season should silence your voice permanently." "May." Her voice was steady now. "Well, I disagree." She walked slowly across the space. "Yes, I was evicted. Yes, I've had overdue bills. Yes, I had a minor on my record when I was 16 because I stole a bottle of cough syrup for my sick mom when we couldn't afford medicine. It was sealed. I'm not ashamed." She paused. "Because those things made me who I am. And if someone thinks that disqualifies me from leading a department focused on dignity and wellness, then they don't understand what this department is for." A murmur of quiet support rippled through the room. "This space is for the people who never got to sit at the table, the ones who've been told to keep their heads down, to be grateful for scraps. The ones who know what it's like to cry in a supply closet and still show up the next day smiling." She took a breath. "You don't have to be perfect to fight for justice. You just have to show up, and I'm here." A janitor from the night crew, a wiry man named Eli, clapped. A second later, so did Carmen. Then others followed. The applause grew, echoing across the open floor like a drumbeat. When it faded, Maya simply nodded. "Thank you. Now let's get back to work." Across town, in a sleek boardroom at the original Kane Global headquarters, Richard sat with his legal counsel and HR executives. On the screen before them, screenshots of the smear campaign, digital footprints, payment records to a private security firm. "I want his badge revoked," Richard said coldly. "Today." "Already done," said Natalie, standing at his side. "He's burned every bridge in this company," Richard continued, "and he just gave us the gasoline to finish the job." One of the lawyers hesitated. "We still need to prepare for retaliation. If Ross goes public—" "Let him," Richard interrupted. "I have no interest in protecting Rod anymore. That man buried good people for years. It ends now." The room fell silent. Then Richard stood. "And make it clear," he added, Anyone who targets Maya Williams is targeting this company's values, and they'll answer to me. Later that afternoon, Maya sat in her office when a knock came at the door. It was Natalie. "I thought you should see this," she said, handing over a thick file. "What is it?" "Internal report. Ross's termination documents. Full audit results. There's also a written apology in there from Richard. He asked legal to include it in the company archives. Permanently." Maya turned the pages slowly. At the bottom was a scanned signature, Richard Kane, and below it, a single line in his handwriting. "We failed you, but you stood anyway. Now we stand with you." Maya closed the file gently. She wasn't naive. The shadows weren't gone. The world didn't fix itself overnight. But the difference was, now, when they came for her, she wasn't standing alone. She picked up her pen and returned to her notes. There was still work to be done. The following week, Maya was invited to attend her first executive leadership roundtable. Not as an observer, not as a silent seat in the back, but as a voting member of the team. Her name had been added to the official board email. Her bio appeared on the Kane Global website, accompanied by a photo one that actually looked like her, curls out, chin raised, eyes steady. The meeting was held in a sleek, circular room with high-backed leather chairs and a skyline view that stretched across Lake Michigan. Maya arrived 15 minutes early, as she always did, dressed in a dark blazer over a soft gray blouse. She carried a simple notepad, not because she couldn't work digital, but because there was something grounding about putting pen to paper. Richard arrived second. He greeted her with a quiet smile and a nod of mutual respect. Others trickled in: department heads, legal advisors, CFOs. Maya recognized most of them by name. Several she'd cleaned offices for over the years. Few made eye contact now. When everyone was seated, Richard stood at the head of the table. "We have 2 items on today's agenda," he began. "First, finalizing our end-of-year financial realignment. Second, and more importantly, the presentation of our new internal wellness framework developed by Maya Williams, Director of Employee Equity and Well-Being." Maya didn't move at first. The silence felt thick, like the room was holding its breath. Then Richard gestured. "Maya?" She stood, walked to the center screen, inserted her USB. Her heart was pounding. A slide deck loaded. The title, "Dignity is Not Optional." She cleared her throat, then looked up. "I won't take more than 10 minutes of your time, but I will ask for your full attention. Because this plan isn't about numbers. It's about people." She clicked to the first slide. 3 janitors injured on the job in the last fiscal year. None filed official complaints. 2 cafeteria workers hospitalized due to untreated stress conditions. 4 employee suicides company-wide since 2019. Not one of them qualified for full wellness coverage, Maya said. Not one received paid time off beyond mandatory state minimums. And when we reached out to their families, only one even knew they had access to a grievance system. She clicked again. "This department will change that." Slide by slide, she walked them through the structure. Support counselors on every floor, confidential grievance processes outside of traditional HR, anonymous satisfaction surveys with built-in follow-up systems, and a rotating advisory board made of non-executive employees from every branch of the company. A soft murmur grew. Then she clicked to the final slide. A single quote filled the screen. "A system that does not listen cannot lead." Silence. Then Richard stood again. "Thank you, Maya. We'll now open the floor to comments and votes on implementation." The first comment came from a man in legal. "The structure is impressive, but, with respect, it could set a dangerous precedent. Oversight outside of HR? A non-executive advisory board? You're empowering people who don't understand the complexity of operations." Maya didn't flinch. "Sir, respectfully, they understand the complexity better than most of us ever will. Because they live it." "Oh," another executive chimed in, a woman this time. "I've reviewed the proposal in depth. There's nothing in it that threatens compliance. In fact, it could protect us from future liability. What Miss Williams is suggesting is visionary." More voices joined, some courteous, some supportive. Then someone said it. "Why her?" The voice came from the far side of the room. A new VP of something. Maya hadn't caught his name. He sat with his arms folded, gaze sharp. We've had wellness programs before. Consultants, experts, people with MBAs. This woman, no offense, was cleaning bathrooms a month ago. Why does she get the final say? The room went still. Maya looked directly at him. Because I've seen every hallway in this company from the ground floor. I've stood next to the people this program is built for. And because I've earned the trust of those who've never trusted anyone in this room. Richard's voice cut through the air. And because I trust her. No. The vote was taken. Unanimous. The plan passed. Later that afternoon, Maya sat alone in her office, the late-day sun casting a golden hue across her desk. She stared out the window at the city, watching it breathe, cars weaving, people moving like threads in a massive quilt of lives. Her phone buzzed. A text from Natalie. That was masterful. Lunch next week to celebrate? She smiled and typed back. Only if it's greasy and comes with fries. Just then, someone knocked at her door. It was Richard. He stepped in, holding a small rectangular box. Can I come in? Of course. He sat across from her and placed the box on her desk. Open it. Inside was a brass plaque, engraved, Maya Williams, Director of Employee Equity and Well-Being, the Heart of Kane Global. She stared at it, stunned. Richard spoke softly. It's not about titles, it's about legacy. And I think you're building something that'll outlive all of us. Maya ran her fingers over the words. This isn't just about me, she said. This is for all the people who never got to be seen. Richard stood. Then let's make sure they always are. She watched him leave, the plaque still resting in her hands. For a long time, she didn't move. She just sat there, holding proof that sometimes even after betrayal, even after blood and storm and fear, justice could still have a face. And hers was finally one of them. The trouble didn't come loudly. It came in the form of a spreadsheet. Maya had been in her office late that Tuesday evening, the sun barely hanging on to the horizon, when Carmen from payroll stopped by looking pale. Miss Williams, she said, her voice low, I think you need to see this. Maya looked up from her laptop. Carmen rarely came by after hours. Her eyes were glassy, and she was gripping a USB drive like it might burn her fingers. Close the door, Maya said quietly. Carmen did. She plugged in the USB and opened a file titled KGL, Internal Allocations, Q, 4 Revised, XLSX. Maya's eyes scanned the document. Line by line. Number by number. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Then she spotted it. A set of shadow funds labeled Well-Being Initiatives, Discretionary, pulling from departments that had never agreed to any contributions. Numbers had been shifted, totals misrepresented. It looked, at first glance, like a budgeting error. But it wasn't. These aren't just typos, Maya said. No, ma'am, Carmen whispered. Someone's using our new wellness initiative as a shell to hide internal fund transfers. Quiet ones. I checked the access logs. These edits were made 2 days ago, by someone using Edmund Ross's old credentials. His account should have been deactivated. I thought the same. But whoever it is, either Ross or someone helping him, they're routing the changes through a backend that circumvents regular audit trails. Maya felt her stomach twist. How many people know? Just me. And now you. Good. Keep it that way. She copied the file to her encrypted drive and slid the USB back into Carmen's palm. Delete everything else. This didn't happen tonight. Understand? Carmen nodded. You're going to report it? Maya's jaw set. I'm going to handle it. The next morning, Maya requested an emergency meeting with Richard and Natalie. She walked into the conference room with the kind of calm that masks quiet fury. The kind of calm that black women like her had mastered, not because it was natural, but because it was necessary. Richard was already seated, nursing his second coffee of the day. Natalie had a legal pad open, pen ready. Maya placed the printed spreadsheet on the table. This is sabotage. Richard looked up. Explain. No. She walked them through the audit, every line, every false transaction, every redirection of funds that had not been approved through the board. When she finished, she said, someone's using our program as cover to launder money, and they're using Ross's digital fingerprint to do it. Natalie narrowed her eyes. That's a federal offense. Yes, it is, Maya replied. But if we go straight to the feds, the whole wellness program goes under the microscope. And right now, it's the only thing some of these employees trust. If it collapses before it's even fully grown, the message is clear: people like me don't belong here after all. Richard leaned forward. Then we need to find out who's behind this, and fast. Quietly. Discreetly. I already have one name in mind, Maya said, but I'm not accusing anyone without proof. Natalie asked, you want to run the investigation yourself? I want Carmen. She knows the systems. She's smart. And she has no loyalty to the old guard. She's payroll, Natalie said skeptically. She's a genius with numbers, Maya replied, and nobody pays attention to payroll until something explodes. Richard nodded slowly. Give her clearance. But keep it off the books. If word of this gets out, we're done. By Thursday, Carmen had uncovered 3 more instances of financial redirection, all of them traced to shell vendors that had been created during Ross's tenure. None of them had actual addresses. One vendor supposedly billed Kane Global for wellness equipment, but the warehouse listed didn't exist. Another processed therapeutic consulting, but the therapist's license had expired 5 years ago. It was all a lie, a net woven carefully and deeply, and the closer they got, the more Maya felt the heat. Anonymous messages began appearing in her inbox. Stay in your lane, girl. No, you think a maid can fix what men like Ross built? Dig too deep and you'll be buried. Maya didn't tell Richard. Not yet. She wanted facts, not fear. But the most chilling thing came Friday afternoon. She arrived home to find her front door slightly ajar. She pushed it open slowly. Nothing seemed stolen. Daisy was still at school. Elena was napping in her chair. But the box of awards and press clippings from her office had been opened, scattered, and one paper was taped to the fridge, a printout of her employee badge photo, with a single word scrawled in red ink across it. Quit. Maya's knees buckled for just a second. Then she straightened. This was bigger than pride now. It was survival. She called Natalie. We're past whispers. Someone came into my home. I'm calling security now, Natalie said. You'll have private details starting tonight. And we go public Monday, Maya said. I want this exposed. That's a risk. It's a message. No more shadows. If they want a war, they'll have to fight it in daylight. That weekend, Maya barely slept. She made pancakes with Daisy, tended to Elena's garden pots, and smiled through it all. But her eyes were always on the windows. Her ears always tuned to the hallway. She'd been afraid before, but this was different. This was war, and she would not run. By Monday morning, the air was electric. Richard Kane himself had sent a company-wide memo late Sunday night, summoning every department head to an emergency meeting in the main auditorium. It was the first time in the company's history that a non-financial crisis had warranted an all-hands gathering. Employees trickled in slowly, most unaware of what was coming. Maya stood backstage with Natalie and Carmen, the weight of what she was about to do pressing against her ribs like armor. She smoothed the front of her dark blazer. No statement jewelry, no dramatic makeup, just truth, plain and sharpened like glass. Carmen squeezed her arm. You sure? I wasn't last week, Maya replied, but after they came into my home. She looked up at the massive velvet curtain and imagined her mother, long gone, whispering in her ear, don't you ever let them scare you out of standing tall. Natalie stepped forward. It's time. The curtain drew back. Hundreds of employees filled the auditorium. Middle management, senior executives, HR, legal, cafeteria workers in uniforms, janitors in faded polos. Even security staff stood near the exits, tense but alert. Richard stepped up to the podium first. Good morning, he began, voice firm. Today, transparency matters more than comfort. He gestured to Maya, and for the first time, she stepped into the center of the stage not as a figure of controversy but as the voice of resistance. She looked out across the faces, some skeptical, some supportive, many simply curious. My name is Maya Williams, she said, and I have something you deserve to know. A screen behind her lit up with numbers and charts Carmen's forensic work laid bare for all to see. For weeks now, Maya continued, an unnamed party within this company has been embezzling funds under the cover of the new wellness program. They've rerouted money from ghost vendors, fake consulting agencies, and fraudulent invoices, all with digital fingerprints tied to a system that should have been deactivated months ago. Gasps echoed across the room. Over $1.4 million, she said. Stolen, hidden, and used to quietly fill the pockets of those who never cared about your well-being, only their own survival. A hand shot up from the crowd. Are you saying this was Edmund Ross? Maya didn't blink. I'm saying his system was the gateway, but others used it after he left. We're still investigating, but evidence suggests there's an internal network protecting those responsible. The room buzzed louder, now murmurs, glances, shifting stares, and then another voice rose from the audience, this time skeptical, almost mocking. You expect us to believe you figured all this out? Maya looked toward the voice. A regional VP, smug, cross-armed. I didn't figure it out alone, she said. I had help, from someone in payroll, someone who'd been told her whole life to keep her head down. She paused. And maybe you don't believe me. Maybe you think this is about revenge or ego. But I stand here today because someone tried to frighten me into silence. They came into my house, taped a threat to my fridge. My fridge. The auditorium went dead silent. Now, I may have started here with a mop in my hand, Maya continued, voice rising, but I don't scare easy, and I will not back down. She turned to Richard, who gave her the faintest nod. Maya faced the crowd again. Every single employee, whether you wear a suit or a smock, deserves protection, fairness, and truth. And if this company wants to claim it stands for those things, now's the time to prove it. Thunderous applause broke out, but not from everyone. From the side aisle, a man in a navy suit quietly slipped out of the room. Carmen spotted him first. That's him, she whispered to Natalie. That's one of the shell vendor's signatories. Natalie didn't hesitate. Security now. Within seconds, 2 guards followed the man out the back. An hour later, Maya sat in Richard's office, her hands still trembling, despite her composed exterior. You just threw a grenade, he said with a faint smile. And we needed the explosion, she replied. You did good, Richard said, even if this gets messy. It will get messy, she corrected. They're going to dig into every decision I've made, every step I've taken. But I'm not afraid of being exposed anymore. Richard leaned back in his chair. Neither am I. Natalie stepped in with a folder. Security apprehended the guy. He's already confessed to working with Ross. Turns out he was a contractor hired 2 years ago under a fake consulting deal. FBI's involved now. Maya stood slowly. Then it's finally happening. Yes, Natalie replied. You just tore the veil off a culture that's been broken for decades. That evening, as Maya walked out of the building, the sky had shifted to a deep orange. The rain had returned gentle, cleansing. She walked past the janitorial crew just clocking in. One of them, an older woman with tired eyes, stopped her. I seen you on the news last night, the woman said. You made us proud. Maya smiled, touched. Thank you. Been waiting years for someone like you to sit at that table. Maya nodded, her voice low and certain. Then let's build a bigger table. As the woman walked away, Maya lingered beneath the street lamp, letting the rain hit her face. She didn't know what would come tomorrow, interviews, investigations, maybe even more threats. But today, the truth had been spoken aloud, and it echoed. The morning news was relentless. Every station, every screen, every scroll. Whistleblower exposes $1. APRM, fraud insight came global. From maid to executive, Maya Williams breaks the system wide open. Security breach raises questions about company oversight. Hero or disruptor? The polarizing rise of Maya Williams. Maya sat at her kitchen table, unmoving. The TV was on mute, but the headlines were loud enough without sound. Daisy played with her cereal nearby, humming to herself, blissfully unaware of the weight suffocating the room. Elena stirred her coffee from across the table. They're coming for you next, she said matter-of-factly. Maya didn't answer. People don't like truth-tellers, Elena added, especially when they're women, especially when they're black, and especially when they didn't ask for permission. Maya finally looked up. What am I supposed to do? Hide? Resign? Elena raised a brow. Would that make Daisy safer? The question landed like a punch. Maya sat back, exhaling. I don't want her to grow up thinking courage is something you apologize for. Then don't apologize. By 10 a.m., The media requests had reached full saturation. CNN, NPR, even The Daily Show wanted an interview. Some were genuine. Some just wanted a scandal to poke at. But the worst wasn't from the press. It came from the internet. Anonymous messages flooded her inbox. Go back to cleaning floors. Affirmative action trash. You're not a hero. You're a headache. Maya tried to ignore them, but some slipped through her armor like the one that simply read, "We know where your daughter goes to school." She forwarded it immediately to company security and the FBI contact Natalie had set up. Then she sat quietly at her desk, clutching Daisy's drawing from 2 chapters ago, the building with hearts on top. That afternoon, Natalie arranged a private room at Kane Global's headquarters for a press conference. Maya had agreed to one statement, no questions, no podium dramatics, just her words, once, directly. She stood before a row of cameras, her expression calm but deliberate. "My name is Maya Williams," she began, "and I am not your perfect hero." The room went still. "I don't have a pristine resume. I don't come from wealth. I wasn't groomed for leadership. I was a janitor, a single mother, a woman who saw something wrong and chose not to look away." She held the silence for a beat. "I didn't expose this fraud for fame. I did it because real people were being hurt, ignored, manipulated, stolen from. People like me. People who've scrubbed your conference rooms and emptied your trash cans and smiled while pretending not to hear your jokes." She leaned slightly forward, her voice low and steady. "If that makes me disruptive, then I hope more of us rise up to disrupt." She stepped back. No questions, no grandstanding, just truth. Later that week, Maya was called into Richard's office. "You've got a decision to make," he said, handing her a letter. She read the header, "Appointed Representative Congressional Committee on Corporate Ethics and Labor Equality." Her mouth fell open. "You've got to be kidding." "They want you to testify," Richard said. "Not just about Ross, about the culture, the silence, everything." Maya stared at the letter. "They'll dig into me. They already have. I'll be picked apart." Probably." She looked at him. "And you still want me to go?" Richard gave a tired smile. "I don't want you to, but I'll support you if you do." Maya looked out the office window. The city felt far away now, small, even. Like the battles she was fighting had shifted from one company to the entire system. "Elena's right," she said after a long pause. "About what? That people don't like truth tellers. But if we stop telling the truth, then people like Ross keep winning." "Oh." She folded the letter. "I'll go." That night, Daisy crawled into bed beside her, curling into her mother's side like she did when she was little and the world was too big. "Are you going to leave again?" she asked sleepily. "Only for a little while," Maya whispered, brushing back Daisy's curls. "But I'll come back. Promise?" Maya swallowed hard. "I promise." Outside the window, lightning blinked on the horizon. But for now, in this small room with one lamp glowing and a child's breath against her arm, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Stillness. Not because the storm had passed, but because she was learning how to stand in it. The capital was colder than she expected. Not the weather, the building. Marble floors, gilded ceilings, stone eyes staring down from portraits of men who'd never had to punch a time card or choose between rent and groceries. Maya stood in the hallway outside the Congressional Committee chamber, her coat still damp from the rain that had soaked her during the walk from the car drop-off. She looked small in the reflection of the polished glass, shoulders squared, jaw tight, heart pounding. Richard had flown in with her, but he was 2 doors down now, talking with their legal counsel. He'd offered to speak on her behalf. She'd said no. This was hers. "Miss Williams?" a young staffer called, holding a clipboard. She nodded. "They're ready for you." The room was large but quiet. 6 representatives sat behind a curved mahogany table. Cameras rolled silently at the back. Reporters scribbled with anticipation. She walked to the witness table and took her seat. No one spoke yet. They were watching her, measuring her. One of the representatives, an older white man with silver hair and a sharp blue tie, leaned forward. "Miss Williams, thank you for being here." Thank you for having me," Maya replied, steady. "You've made quite an impact. Not just on Kane Global, but on corporate accountability as a whole." You've exposed a major fraud scheme and highlighted deeply rooted cultural issues inside one of the country's most influential companies." Maya didn't respond. She knew better than to fall into polite praise. She waited. The representative continued. "Before we begin formal questions, is there anything you'd like to say?" She took a breath, looked straight ahead. "Yes." She opened a worn notebook, the same one she'd used at Kane Global, now filled with scribbles and headlines. "I didn't come here to perform," she began. "I'm not an activist by design. I'm not a politician. I was a janitor, then a mother, then someone who saw something wrong and said, 'No.'" The chamber stilled. "I've been called brave, reckless, a hero, a problem, but all I really did was refuse to look away when people who looked like me were being used, then discarded." She closed the notebook. "And if you want a solution today, I'll give you one. Listen to the people no one listens to. You'd be shocked what they know." The questions began. Some were sharp, political. "Miss Williams, are you suggesting that every corporation suffers from this level of corruption?" "No, Congressman, but many of them suffer from silence. And silence is where corruption breeds." Others tried to catch her off guard. "Would you say Kane Global's diversity programs were a failure?" "No, ma'am. I'd say they were decorative, not foundational." Even Richard flinched at that, but Maya didn't. The toughest came from a representative from Arizona, a known skeptic of corporate regulation. "Miss Williams, you've gained quite a platform. Some say your story is being used to push a narrative, one where businesses are cast as villains and whistleblowers are turned into celebrities. How do you respond to that?" Maya looked him straight in the eye. "I didn't want a platform," she said. "I wanted a paycheck. But I earned a platform when the system tried to punish me for saving a man's life, and I earned it again when they tried to bury the truth under paperwork and security badges." A ripple of murmurs. The camera flash flickered. "I'm not a celebrity," she finished. "I'm evidence." After 2 hours, the session adjourned. Richard found her outside, standing under the columns, staring out at the Washington skyline, her coat pulled tight. "You didn't blink," he said. "I wanted to," she admitted. "When that guy asked me about being a celebrity, I wanted to throw the mic at his face." Richard chuckled. "But I didn't," Maya added, "because Daisy's going to watch this one day, and I want her to see what restraint looks like." Richard sobered. "You did more than represent Kane Global today. You represented every woman who's ever been told to wait her turn." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Maya asked, "Do you think they'll actually do anything, policy-wise?" Richard hesitated. "Some will, some won't. But they can't say they didn't know anymore. That's something, I guess." "No," he corrected. "That's everything." Ikles. Back at the hotel that night, Maya sat on the bed, legs curled under her, as the broadcast replayed clips from her testimony. Daisy's voice rang out from the other end of the phone. "Mommy, you were on TV." Maya smiled, heart warm. "I was, baby. Did you watch it with Elena?" "Uh-huh. She said you made a bunch of men very nervous." Maya laughed. "She's not wrong. Are you coming home soon?" "Yes, tomorrow." "Good. I saved you the last cookie." Tears welled in Maya's eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. I love you. I love you more." She hung up and stared at the TV again. The anchor's voice played over a clip of her closing remarks. "I'm not a symbol of perfection. I'm a reminder that anyone, no matter where they start, can walk into the lion's den and tell the truth out loud." Maya turned off the TV, because she didn't need to hear it again. She was already living it. The plane landed just after 7 p.m. Maya stepped onto the jet bridge, exhausted but composed, her leather bag slung over her shoulder. She wore no makeup, no heels, just sneakers and a gray sweatshirt Daisy had drawn on with fabric markers. "My mom is braver than Batman." A car from Kane Global was waiting for her at the curb. But Maya asked the driver to take the long way home. She needed time to think, time to breathe. She'd spoken truth to power in Washington, but the pressure hadn't faded, it had deepened. She was no longer just Maya the maid, or Maya the miracle. She was now Maya the disruptor, the symbol, the threat to the old order. And when you burn old houses down, the smoke doesn't ask who was innocent. Daisy was asleep when Maya got home. Elena had left the porch light on, and the small house smelled like lentil soup and lavender candles. Maya exhaled for the first time in hours. She tiptoed into Daisy's room, kissed her forehead, then went to the kitchen. There, waiting at the table with a glass of wine, was Elena. "Washington make you a star yet?" Elena asked, half grinning. "Not a star," Maya replied. "Just a bigger target." She poured herself tea and sat down. The two women sat in familiar silence, sipping, letting the warmth of the room push the cold world outside for a little while. But then Elena cleared her throat. "I got a call today," she said, not meeting Maya's eyes. Maya raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "Your sister." "Huh." Maya tensed. "Janelle? We haven't spoken in years. What did she want?" "To warn you." Maya slowly put her cup down. "She says someone's been offering money to dig into your past. Real money. Old boyfriends, employers, high school teachers." Maya's stomach dropped. "Who?" She didn't say, but she said one name came up that made her nervous. Maya leaned in. "Who?" Elena looked directly at her. "James." Maya went still. James, Daisy's father. The man who disappeared before Daisy was born. The man who, last Maya had heard, had cleaned out a joint account and left town. "He's in Chicago," Elena continued. "Has been for 2 weeks. He's talking to someone from the press, possibly more." Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. "He swore he'd stay gone." "People break promises," Elena said softly. "Especially when there's a paycheck attached." Maya stood and walked to the window, gripping the edge of the curtain as if the wind outside might rip it open. "He's not going to hurt her," she said. "I won't let him." Elena was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "It's not Daisy he's after. It's you." The next morning, Kane Global's media team received a leak. A blog post had gone viral overnight, titled, "The Truth About Maya Williams. Is the Whistleblower Hiding Her Own Past?" It was trash, sensational, speculative, but the kind of trash that stuck. It claimed Maya had once been arrested for assault, false. That she'd falsified references on her cleaning job application, ridiculous. And that she was a neglectful mother who abandoned her child for corporate fame. Underneath the byline, contributed anonymously by a former romantic partner of Miss Williams. Maya stared at the screen in Richard's office. He paced slowly behind her. "James did this," she said quietly. Richard looked at her. "You want me to respond legally?" "No, you'd only give it oxygen." "You want us to go public with your real story?" "No," she said again. "They'd twist it, use Daisy's name, pull pictures." Richard sat down beside her. "I can handle it," Maya said. "But it's a distraction, and it's meant to make me slip." He nodded, but his jaw clenched. "Then we do what they hate most." "What's that?" "We keep building." That afternoon, Maya held a team meeting in the wellness annex. The media firestorm hadn't reached the lower ranks yet, and she wasn't about to let it bleed down into fear. "I know things feel heavy," she said to her staff Carmen, Natalie, and half a dozen others who had stood by her since the beginning. "But nothing that's true has changed. We're still here, still working, and no blog post gets to define us." Carmen raised her hand. "What if it keeps getting louder?" Maya smiled grimly. "Then we outwork it. We make so much good noise they can't hear the lies over the truth." They clapped. It wasn't just morale, it was loyalty, not to a symbol, but to a woman who kept showing up. That night, Maya sat on the couch after Daisy had gone to bed, flipping through an old photo album. There, pressed between 2 pages, was a picture of her and James, young, naive, both smiling too hard. She almost didn't recognize herself. She studied her face. The girl she used to be. Then she closed the album. She wasn't her anymore. She was something forged, something harder, and still, somehow, still tender. A text buzzed on her phone. From Natalie. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we rebuild." Maya replied. "We never stopped." "Nah." But in a dim bar across town, James sat across from a second reporter. He sipped his drink and smirked. She always wanted to look good, even when she was lying. He tapped the screen of his phone. "Wait till you hear what she did the year before Daisy was born." The storm had moved in overnight. Rain lashed the windows as Maya stood at the edge of her living room, watching the streetlights blur through the glass. The wind howled like a warning, but inside, the house was calm. Daisy slept upstairs. Elena snored faintly from her recliner. And Maya, well, Maya was no longer afraid of storms. The exposé had dropped that morning. A full-page feature from a national tabloid titled, From Housekeeper to Hypocrite, the untold past of Maya Williams. It recycled the same lies James had spun, manipulated timelines, twisted truths, half-whispers dressed up as scandal. They dredged up her past, her mistakes, even her decision to keep Daisy despite being alone and broke. What the article didn't include: the time she walked 5 miles to a hospital in the middle of the night when Daisy had a fever of 104, the months she lived off ramen to afford tutoring sessions, the nights she read by flashlight in the janitor's closet just to finish her online coursework. Because those things didn't sell, they just built character. Richard called first. "We'll issue a formal response," he said, full backing from the board. Maya said, "No." "One." "Excuse me?" "No press conference, no firestorm. They want outrage. Let's give them something worse, silence." Richard hesitated. "You sure?" "Yes," Maya said, "but I will respond, just not the way they expect." 2 days later, Maya walked into Kane Global's community center, an old, converted warehouse in the south side of Chicago. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie that read, "I see you." It was packed with employees, families, retirees, and even a few curious journalists. A new initiative was launching that day. The Maya Fund, a non-profit branch under Kane Global dedicated to supporting single parents in corporate environments. Childcare subsidies, mental health access, career reentry programs. It was the first of its kind on a national scale, and Maya was its face. She took the mic not for damage control, but for mission. "Some of you have read things about me lately," she said, smiling faintly. "Some true, some twisted, and some just flat-out trash." Ugh. Laughter rippled through the room. "But let me clarify something right now. I have never been perfect. I have messed up. I've fallen. I've made choices. I had to survive. But every step I've taken has been toward a future where women like me don't have to beg to be seen." She paused. "This fund isn't about me. It's about you. It's about rewriting the story before someone else writes it for you." Thunderous applause. Afterward, a young single father approached her with tears in his eyes. "I didn't think anyone remembered us. You reminded me we matter." Maya shook his hand firmly. "You've always mattered. You just needed a mic." That night, Maya returned home to find a letter on her doorstep. No return address, just her name. Inside was a photo of her and James, the original from that old album. Folded behind it, a note in his handwriting. "You won, but they'll never stop looking for cracks. Stay sharp. For Daisy." She burned the note in the kitchen sink. The next morning, Maya walked Daisy to school. The sun had returned, and the sidewalks were lined with golden leaves. As they reached the front gate, Daisy stopped and looked up. "Mommy? Yeah? Are you still famous?" Maya knelt beside her. "Baby," she said, brushing a curl from her daughter's cheek. "I'm not trying to be famous. I'm trying to be useful." Daisy nodded slowly, then gave her mom a hug that held more wisdom than her 7 years could explain. Weeks passed. The tabloids moved on. The trolls found other targets. But Maya's work remained. Her name was added to the permanent board of trustees at Kane Global. She began consulting for companies across the country, teaching them not how to be perfect but how to listen. And one quiet afternoon, as the city hummed beneath her, Maya returned to the rooftop where it all began, where she had once wiped windows unnoticed, while men in suits walked past her. She looked over Chicago, not with bitterness, but with belief. Behind her, Richard stepped into the sunlight, holding a coffee. "Big day tomorrow," he said. "The governor wants to honor you at the State House." Maya smiled, sipping her drink. "I'm not doing it for the medals." "I know, but take them anyway. You earned it." They stood in silence for a while, watching the clouds drift. Then Maya said, "Justice doesn't always look like a gavel or a verdict. Sometimes, it just looks like getting the last word." Richard grinned. "Well, Maya, you got it." She turned to him. "Not yet." And with that, she walked back inside where 1,000 stories were still waiting to be changed. Maya Williams' journey teaches us that courage isn't always loud sometimes. It's found in quiet acts of persistence, in choosing integrity over comfort, and in standing tall even when the world tries to silence you. Her story reminds us that justice isn't about perfection. It's about refusing to let fear dictate our truth. No matter where you come from or how the world sees you, your voice matters, and when used with purpose, it can become a force that changes everything.